So why do you think it happens at night and not during the day? Just out of curiosity, you've been there. Like, what are you watching? Who's coming out at night exactly?
There were gang members who were there, and they were armed. I think they took advantage of the literal anarchy, and that they could go to a place where there was no police because there was there were hard borders that were surrounded this zone. So, and law enforcement kept away, and so that was just a perfect opportunity for criminals to go in
And
and
what did they want to do? What
uh,
is it that it gave them free rein to do?
shootings.
Okay, so that's kind of odd. So who are they shooting? I mean, look, if it's gang warfare, you know why they're shooting each other. It's usually guys who are looking for status, who've been challenged in some way, who are out to prove themselves. Like, there's a good sociology of that kind of shooting. It's like, well, why are these guys going into this free zone, summer love thing and shooting? Who are they shooting and why?
I don't know another name, but they were untrained, and they ended up murdering a 16-year-old. As far as I know, no suspect has ever been identified in that case.
And
And
how was that handled by the mainstream media, that particular event? Because that's quite the event.
yeah, that was then the second murder that happened at Autonomous Zone. So then by then, the press started to be a bit more critical because that was nearing 3 weeks at that point. A lot of the residents were feeling a bit more emboldened to speak out anonymously not anonymously, but unnamed, to the press about what they're witnessing, what they're hearing at night. I was there, one of the nights that I was there, a burglar broke into a car repair business and allegedly tried to start a fire inside. But the owner was there and he had security, so he detained this individual. The news went out and they had a speaker system set up in the autonomous zone with a microphone. Somebody went up to the stage and said that a Black person was being held by some racist whites, and the entire mob sprinted to this business, broke down the barrier at the business, got in and got their guy out. The business owner said he told press later on that he had called police about a dozen times and they just wouldn't respond.
And what did they
And
do with him?
the person that got away,
Oh, he
or
got
who?
away. Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, it's
Yeah, he got
amazing they
away.
didn't lynch him.
Oh, so yeah, you're talking about the business owner. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Sorry.
could have become deadly at that point. Again, this is one of those things like I'm watching, and I feel so helpless in a way that I'm observing, and if they start to kill this business owner, that there was nothing I could do. Police weren't responding. They had already received many phone calls about that incident, and they didn't respond. Um, but I bring up the case of the Chaz as just sort of like just one example of what like a real life manifestation of this Antifa ideology is. There's certain parts that are, you could argue, are nice, like this aspect of community building that I witnessed during the day was it seemed like a religious community in that they
Yeah,
recognized
but
one
okay, but
another.
let's take that apart a bit here
Yeah.
too. Okay, so first of all, let's not forget that this daytime utopia existed in the middle of the richest country in the world's ever produced. It's like, so we're giving things away for free. They have no cost. It's like, no, someone else bore the cost. That food didn't magically appear out of nowhere. Nothing that satiates hunger comes without a cost. Nothing that provides shelter comes without a cost. And so this is an artificial utopia set up by clueless juveniles who have no sense whatsoever of how privileged they are. They're so privileged they think food is free. And the reason they're that privileged is because food is damn near free. And the reason for that is that we live in a miraculous society that's made food free. And it isn't because it has no cost. Man, you think of all the blood that's been spilled over the centuries to pay for the terrible struggle that it took us all to figure out how to do that. That's not free. And it's an appalling indictment of our education system that anybody can come out of it thinking that way. So even during the day, so you have, and it's the same with the San Francisco Summer of Love in some sense, you know, that could have never come about at all, even to the degree that it did, without there being this unbelievable largesse and plenitude that characterizes modern Western societies. So, I mean, when we see people on the street even, and I'm not saying that being on the street is not a terrible thing, but it's a complicated thing. We don't see people who are skeletal. We see people who have enough to eat. And so it's just rubbish right from top to bottom. And to have a politician say, well, you know, maybe it could be a summer of love. It's like, what the hell does that mean exactly? Our system is so broke that violent, clueless, radical juveniles can arbitrarily occupy a part of a city and in 2 weeks make something better. Really? Like, what the hell? I don't get it. Now, you talked about optics. So I've been talking to these Democrats, for example, about how to conduct yourself ethically in the political domain. And I've been talking to Republicans as well. And one of the things we sort of zeroed in on is this idea of instrumentality. You know, if you're doing something for a particular goal, maybe almost regardless of what that goal is, then you tend to use people for your end. And you might say, well, we have to stop Trump, so it's okay to use this person for that end. But I don't buy that at all. I think there's something deeply wrong about it. You know, and so when I do these podcasts, for example, what I'm really trying to do is just to find out some things I don't know. I don't really have a plan. Like, did I have a plan to talk to you? I'll tell you what my plan was. It was like, well, I'm going to read as much of Andy's book as I can manage in the time I have to do it. I'm going to do my background research to the degree that I can. Then I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions about things I don't understand. That's the whole damn plan. And this instrumentality, we've got to get rid of this idea that we can use people for an end. I don't care what the damn end is. And, you know, if you and I are doing this right, we're having an honest conversation. That's all we're doing. And that's a hard thing to do. So, okay, so back to, okay, your answer to whether or not you're exaggerating this was to point to the consequences, like the defund the police, that sort of consequence, and the destabilization of cities like Minneapolis and Portland. And how destabilized do you think they have become because of this?
But they destabilize in the sense that the people who are dying are mostly Black and brown people. So the elite liberal class of the cities they don't experience that loss of life, if you know what I mean. They may hear the gunshots more frequently in the streets. They may see businesses shuttered or damaged because of bullet wounds, but it's not people in their families and their friend circles who are dying. So in some ways, they're kind of always protected from the consequences of their political decision making or political demands. I think one other thing about
so if you look at hierarchies, if you look at the way hierarchies work in the animal kingdom, for example, so even, let's say, birds that really don't live in flocks, they still have a hierarchy. And the hierarchy is some birds have better nesting sites. And so they're closer to food. They don't get exposed to wind and rain so much. And they're birds that are generally in better physical health. They're like they're birds that are in better physical health. Let's leave it at that. They sing louder songs, the males. They attract higher quality, healthier female mates. They have the good nests. Okay, now a flu comes through that area, an avian flu. The birds die from the bottom of the hierarchy up. And so that's very much in keeping with what you're describing, right? Is that as we move up our hierarchies, whether they're based on competence or power, we shield ourselves from stress. That's partly why we actually want to move up the damn hierarchies. And so then when things get destabilized, people die from the bottom up. That's what's the old saying, when the upper class catches a cold, the lower class dies of pneumonia. And so that's the luxury belief problem too, isn't it? Is we can have these addle-pated utopian schemes that we use to pat ourselves on the back for our ethical superiority, We can fund their implementation, because you talk about that interestingly in your book, right? These left-wing organizations funneling money into these more violent extremist groups. We can pat ourselves on the back for standing up for the oppressed, and when things go sideways, well, it's just the oppressed that die. So I can't figure out why the left stands for this, you know? That's the thing I can't get, is that I thought you guys were for the working class.